Russia accuses Ukraine of turning into a police state as Ukrainian soldiers are killing themselves, and all of this is turning into a civil war. None of that is remotely true, because this is StopFake, the place where we break down Russian disinformation about Ukraine and a little more. So let's get to it. Back in October, Russian media jumped all over Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova's statement that Ukraine was becoming a police state, disseminating it far and wide. Zakharova claimed that Ukraine is planning to track Ukrainian users of the Russian social media platform Vkontakte. During a briefing in October, Zakharova said, quote, "Ukraine is taking giant steps towards building a police state. There is no other name for what is happening there. At the same time, Kyiv authorities shamelessly declare their commitment to European values and principles." She also called on, quote, international human rights organizations and Kyiv's Western patrons to stop being silent and adequately assess the gross human rights violations in Ukraine. One may well ask what got Ms. Zakharova so excited that her anti-Ukrainian rhetoric was even more fiery than usual. Well, the issue is Ukraine's cybersecurity and Russia's social media platforms. After Russia annexed and occupied Crimea and invaded and occupied eastern Donbass, Ukraine attempted to control the influx of Russian media and disinformation flooding the country. In the spring of 2017, acting on the recommendation of Ukraine's National Security Council, then President Petro Poroshenko issued an executive order cutting off access to Russian social media companies Vkontakte and Odnoklassniki, as well as the Yandex and Mail.ru platforms. In May of 2020, President Zelensky prolonged the ban. Last September, Vkontakte announced that they had managed to get around Ukraine's prohibition with the help of proxy servers and were once again available in Ukraine, but only on mobile telephones. At a recent virtual conference entitled Digital Transformation, Cybersecurity Perspectives and Risks, Ukraine's National Security Council Secretary Oleksiy Danilov addressed the issue of Ukrainians using the prohibited Vkontakte social media platform. Danilov pointed out that using the resource carries responsibility, and Ukraine has the capacity to track all users of this platform. Now, local elections were held in Ukraine back on October the 25th, and the Ukrainian National Security and Defense Council, the NSDC, noted that an increase in Russian social network activity before the elections in Ukraine may pose a threat to the country's national security. NSDC Secretary Serhiy Demiduk said Russian social media activity is being intensified in Ukraine, not to give people access to additional social media networks, but to collect information about Ukrainian users, as well as to spread disinformation and influence and manipulate public opinion. Ukraine is currently working on a cybersecurity and information security strategy expected to be approved in the next 6 months. The possibility of tracking users of prohibited Russian social media platforms is simply one topic currently being discussed. In last year's Freedom Net report, that's the Freedom House report assessing the level of internet freedom in 65 countries, Ukraine was rated as being partly free with a score of 61, while Russia came in as not free with a score of 30 out of a possible 100. Claims that Ukraine is building a police state are not only grossly exaggerated, they are part and parcel of Russia's narrative that Ukraine is a failed state, a fascist state, a nationalist state. You get the picture. In mid-October, several pro-Kremlin publications featured stories claiming that 1 Ukrainian soldier was killed and 3 wounded as a result of a mortar explosion. The source for this claim is Oleg Nikitin, a representative of the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic. According to Nikitin, the soldiers of the 503rd Marine Battalion were training with mortars when an explosion in the muzzle killed 1 soldier on the spot and injured 3 others. The reason for the explosion, Nikitin claims, is lax safety standards and improper ammunition handling. StopFake asked the 503rd Battalion representatives as to the veracity of Nikitin's allegations. According to the battalion's press officer, Oleksiy Hodzenko, there were no incidents with the mortars among Ukraine's military, and Nikitin's claim is just another fake in a long narrative of disinformation concerning Ukraine's military. Furthermore, mortars have not been used by Ukraine's armed forces since August of this year, according to an official Ministry of Defense statement. One of the Kremlin's main disinformation narratives is that there is a civil war in Ukraine. A while back, an article appeared in the German edition of RT, formerly Russia Today, that repeats the civil war narrative, adding that Russia is not part of the war and that in the case of MH17, the joint investigative team does not take into account Russia's contributions. MH17 is the Malaysian airliner that was shot down by a Russian-controlled Buk surface-to-air missile system from Ukraine's territory occupied by the Russian army. Now, All these narratives have been refuted several times as disinformation. The reality is that when Russia invaded Ukraine's Crimean Peninsula, Russia provoked the war in Ukraine, and it is therefore not a civil war. In fact, the Office of the Prosecutor of the International Criminal Court has stated that, quote, the information available suggests that the situation within the territory of Crimea and Sevastopol amounts to an international armed conflict between Ukraine and the Russian Federation. This international armed conflict began at the latest on February 26, 2014, when the Russian Federation deployed members of its armed forces to gain control over parts of Ukrainian territory without the consent of the Ukrainian government. The European Union stated in July of 2014 that, quote, arms and fighters continue flowing into Ukraine from the Russian Federation. And then, at the NATO summit in Wales in September of 2014, NATO leaders condemned in the strongest terms Russia's military intervention in Ukraine and demanded Russia to stop and withdraw its forces from Ukraine and from the country's border. NATO leaders also demanded that Russia comply with international law and its international obligations and responsibilities, end its illegitimate occupation of Crimea, refrain from aggressive actions against Ukraine, halt the flow of weapons, equipment, people, and money across the border to their proxy forces, and stop fomenting tension along and across the Ukrainian border. According to the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency, the DIA, Russian special forces and troops operated to mobilize, lead, equip, and support proxy forces and militias in the Donbas region of eastern Ukraine from the spring of 2014 to the present, although their presence was denied by Moscow. And finally, Russian President Vladimir Putin admitted Russia's military presence in Ukraine in 2015. So, next time you read something about civil war in Ukraine, you can be sure you are reading Russian disinformation. That's it for this week. Stay safe and be on the lookout for fakes. Remember, wearing a mask, washing your hands, and social distancing will protect you from the coronavirus, but critical thinking will protect you from Russian disinformation. And if you spot any disinformation about Ukraine, send it to us for a truth autopsy. I'm Marko Suprun, and this is StopFake. Thanks for watching.